It's been stated many times online that there is this belief amongst players, especially in the old school uh, vein, that there should be no disease or crippling injuries because of the healing magic afforded to clerics and druids, and in some cases, even bards. But this is a vast misunderstanding of how things operate and the realities of the day-to-day life in a fantasy world. The reality is that most commoners or peasants are not going to have access to a cleric or druid, or a bard. I mean, they might feel overly lucky if a bard makes it into their small thorp or village. No, these these individuals that are out toiling on the farms and in the fields that make the larger population centers possible by growing the food are in a pretty precarious situation. They are a long ways away from where a temple or shrine or church would have a cleric on staff, and that's questionable in and of itself. A lot of these places are these temples and shrines and churches are actually administered by acolytes. They're not even full clerics. And the cleric and druid class are a class because they are special. They are not commonly found anywhere, but if they are to be found as an NPC, they are not going to be near a small village or thorp. They are going to be in the larger population centers, the larger towns and cities, which is the fact that the temple or shrine or church was constructed is one of the reasons why there was population growth. They tended to group around these locations in order to create a larger population center. And so while a thorp or village may have a shrine, it is probably tended to by the faithful of the peasants in that village or thorp and not by an actual holy figure of a cleric or a druid. And so they are a long ways away from any magical healing assistance should something bad happen to them. And things bad happening to peasants would actually be, and I mean, historically was in a fantasy world, it would be quite common. Anything from a broken arm or worse, a broken leg can be fatal to a commoner. Something as bad as a really bad cold virus could potentially be lethal because these people did not have access to the healing that would be commonplace in the real world today. So how do we get around that? Well, the misconception, of course, comes in that almost all healing is done by a cleric or druid, and that wouldn't be true either. There are natural remedies. Even in the real world, there are natural remedies that can be quite effective. Not everything requires a doctor. Although, if you are sick, I highly recommend that you go to a doctor and not go online looking for natural remedies. That being said, there are natural remedies. And hence comes in the healer uh, that usually lives in these smaller thorps and villages that dispenses out healing through the ways of, in most cases, through herbalism. Now, if you're playing Castles and Crusades, and if you're not, you should be, uh, there are several herbal remedies available. If you are, for instance, an adventurer, of course, if you're playing, you are an adventurer. The more common aspect, if you go someplace and purchase a healing potion, is that you are going to get an herbal remedy. These do not restore as many hit points as a actual magical concoction. And the reason why you're going to get an herbal remedy is because magical potions such as a heal light wounds uh, or a cure disease. These potions, being magical, are a vast expenditure for the person that's creating them. So if a cleric is actually high enough level, I believe they have to be ninth level before they can even attempt this, and they have to be able to cast the spell. So in some cases, for the greater abilities, they might have to be much higher. It costs them a great amount of gold for starters. Gold that is being tithed to the temple or church, um, or their person would have to go into the creation of said potion. In addition to that, they may or may not, depending on the castle keeper, have to expend experience points. In my game, you have to expend both. You'd have to expend both experience and gold expenditure in order to craft such an item. So magical items are fairly rare because of the massive expenditure into creating them. Now, that being said, I may actually revise how magical items and potions are created with the upcoming engineering crafting that is forthcoming, along with the adventure Spellbook Reforged, which is in BackerKit right now. So that is imminent. If you are looking for that kind of information, you may want to jump over to BackerKit and check that out. I will drop a link to that here in the comments below. But I may change that once that information comes out. But engineering crafting is going to be a complete revamp and addition to the older book, Adtherp's Natural Materials. And if you haven't looked at Adtherp's Natural Materials and you're looking for something to peruse until engineering crafting comes out, I highly recommend it. Go grab the PDF. It has a lot of well, it's not very in depth, but it does have a lot of information, especially about crafting herbal remedies and what goes into that. These potions, if you get a healing herbal healing potion, you're probably looking at like 1d4 plus 1 healing upon drinking it, things like that. Not near the amount that you would get with, for instance, a heal light wounds or some other spell that has been turned into a potion. But this is going to be the more realistic route that your commoners and peasants are going to have access to. Potions, salves, teas, that kind of thing, along with some know-how on how to splint a broken limb or how to remove an arrow or bolt. Most of these healers would have some kind of butcher skill, and they would, from harvesting animals, they would know how to perform these kinds of surgeries without doing more damage than is necessary to remove it. Included in that would also be trepanation. If there is, for whatever reason, a swelling or some kind of concussive force of the head, some grievous head injury, drilling into the skull can be used to relieve pressure and thus save the patient. And trepanation goes as far back as ancient Egypt. They have found signs where mummies at some point had had trepanation performed on them. Some of them have even had minor brain surgery performed on them. So if you have a healer who is both versed in the butchering skill and the herbalism skill and has the resources available to them, they would act as a decent healer for a small thorp or village. They would go so far as to even have some skill in dentistry, knowing how to remove tooth. They might have some skill in doing fillings, but more than likely you're talking about just losing the tooth. And a grievous injury to an arm, anything you know, if it's a compound break, you're probably going to end up losing the arm, and so they would have some skill at amputation. That's probably the most that they do would be amputations, would be pretty normal. In addition to that, believe it or not, healers often were also sought to for simple barber skills. If people didn't want to look like they fell into a rusty spinning blade trap and instead wanted a decent haircut, right to the healer they would go. And this was true clear up into the 1800s in the United States, where your dentist was also a barber. Oftentimes, they were also the doctor, and there was only one of them in the town. And so, this would be kind of how these commoners and peasants got through some of their illnesses. Uh, they would have ways of fighting infections, such as putting honey on a wound. Will help prevent infection. They would know and have access to herbs that had some kind of healing or beneficial properties. And that comes in the future book that is coming out that I am currently working on myself. Character background careers, and every character should have some kind of background. And the purpose of this book is not to really have to give too much thought to it. You pick one of the career packages, and you get whatever is involved with that, and then that is what you did before you became an adventurer. And in this case, it would be the healer's apprentice. Not a full healer, only an apprentice. The reason for that, and most of these careers are kind of the apprenticeship level, because at some point you left that career or whatever path you were taking on that career to go adventuring. And so a healer's apprentice is pretty much going to be well regarded in any adventuring party. They have some skill, of course, in butchering, which allows them to perform surgeries as needed, and they also have herbalism. The career, they have an old medical kit and an herb satchel and probably a cleaver for said surgeries, mostly amputations. And of course, the equipment, because it is they were an apprentice. This is not the best equipment. There's no need really for gold expenditure on this equipment. It's the type of stuff that is old enough and used enough that if there is some kind of, or if there's a natural one that is rolled, it's probably going to break the equipment. So later, should they want to upgrade that and they are someplace that they can do so, they can purchase better equipment with gold that they have attained. But the biggest part of this is that they will have that each of these character careers has a feature. In the case of the healer's apprentice, they can roll one of their class's hit dice and give that back as natural as hit points during natural healing to any patient that is taking a full day's rest that they are providing care for. Now, if they're say that they are, let's say that they're a rogue, and so they roll a 1d4, and they get lucky and they roll a 4. They could give 4 hit points back to a single patient. If they are looking after more than one patient, they have to divide that roll in hit points among the patients and decide who gets what. If they rolled, for instance, a 3 and they were looking after 2 patients, they would have to decide which patient gets the 2 and which patient gets the 1, which delineates the fact that they are spending more time, hopefully, on the more injured individual, or at least on the one that they like more. Because of this, they would be granting a party a much better amount of healing than without them. Now, this is, of course, assuming that they have access to the ability to forage for natural herbs, which literally grow almost everywhere in every forested region or meadow or field that you can think of. Almost inevitably, they would be able to find something, unless they are in one of the nine hells or the abyss. And even then, they may be able to find something. So they're as long as they have the ability to forage for these herbs, they can create healing salves, they can create healing potions, teas, and even go so far as to provide the ability to create new bandages. They would have knowledge in how to boil them and make them to be sanitary, rather than just tearing off a dirty piece of cloth and wrapping the wound in it, which ultimately would make things worse. So, the Healer's Apprentice is one of the background careers that will be in the forthcoming character background careers book for Castles and Crusades and the Braunhaven's Player's Guide. This should be. It is extant. It is in the process of being written right now. And I'm intending on putting some additional information into it as far as sanity goes, and some ideas for role playing flaws gained via sanity loss. Um, really, that came about to me as the way that my wife role played her dwarf paladin after getting really, really messed up by a blue dragon, and she developed phobias, and those phobias kind of developed further into physical kind of tics, and she started to walk with a limp and a cane, even though she didn't have a leg injury. That would, as soon as she would get into combat, she would drop the cane and draw her weapon. Um, she role played. I felt that she role played the sanity loss very well, and so I'm kind of doing a chapter on sanity and how to role play your character's flaws, because it can go far beyond, the normal of, well, I'm going to role play my barbarian as being dumb because he only has an intelligence of 3. It can go beyond that. Maybe the barbarian suffered an injury while fighting a demigod, and now they have some kind of nervous tic or eccentricity that comes out in the role play of that character. And so there will be a chapter on that as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.